Hi, this is section C of our lecture outline, the communion of saints and the differentiated self. As the interior dynamic of the triune God, being in relationship stands at the center of eternal reality. And this is something that human image bearers are to reflect in their own lives, in our own lives and connections. Keep in mind that as a uniting power or force, the Holy Spirit is always nudging alienated persons back toward reconciliation and community. The Spirit is continually at work to foster empathy, generosity, and sensitivity, and to restrain the divisive impulses of the sinful nature. So crucial to the development and sustaining of authentic community is how successfully we manage power. Now, the communion of saints has been affirmed by Christians since the earliest of the creeds. And it's a spiritual reality that is created by the Spirit of God. The Christian martyr Dietrich Bonhoeffer pointed out that this communion of the saints already pre-exists as one of God's gifts to us. It's not something ultimately that we create, and that's a very important point. Our only choice is whether to respond with embrace of this gift or rejection of this gift. Our only choice is really whether to align with its ethos or to push it away. Now, healthy Christian community, which is patterned after God's nature as three in one, respects the human need for a rhythm of solitude and community, of both differentiated personhood and deep belonging. Healthy Christian communities are, in a sense, ecosystems in which persons can flourish. And for that, we need both connection and, at times, space. Now, the scriptures, once again, are concerned to not only tell us where we're headed on this community thing, but how we get there. And leaders, for example, are vital. And leaders who function as true pastors, and the word pastor is rooted in the concept of shepherd, are vital to healthy community dynamics. And you can read about that, and have, I hope, in John 10, verses 1 to 21. And another thing we discover is that the leaders who facilitate authentic community are ones in which certain character qualities are deeply habituated and embedded. And we can read about that in narratives like Acts chapter 6, or in the more didactic or teaching passages like 1 Timothy chapter 3. And here's another thing about the kind of community that the Spirit is creating. When the Spirit's at work, we discover that diversity is not just something to be tolerated or worked around, but something that's actually celebrated. And of course, there are many sides of diversity, and not just racial, but that's part of it, but socioeconomic, temperament, age, and just a host of others that the Spirit celebrates rather than crushes or homogenizes. Now, the next section in the lecture outline is the church as institution and community. The reality of community is ideally embedded in concrete social arrangements and structures. It's normal and perhaps inevitable that the inward dynamics, if you will, of fellowship and identity will eventually find expression in embodied realities like missionary agencies, church buildings, organizational structures. And this is not something to be regretted because we are, after all, embodied creatures. And it's not just embodiment in physical bodies, but what's real on the inside is inevitably embodied in social structures as well. But the wonder and mystery of genuine community often spills out beyond these humanly constructed structures, and in some cases survives almost despite them. We hear, for example, a great deal about the distinction between religion, which is often considered bad, and spirituality, which is more commonly considered a good thing today. But that's actually a bit of a misleading distinction because, in fact, the fundamental difference is between a public and communal expression of faith and a personal and privatized expression of faith. And of course, the Christian vision is for the former rather than the latter. As our friend David Benner reminds us, spiritual communities are, after all, simply networks of spiritual friends. And I think the challenge for us as believers is to find the right balance between the quest for authenticity, that perfect location where we can really be ourselves, and on the other hand, a genuine understanding of the limitations of structure on the one hand, and a proper humility and realism that acknowledges that all the disappointments of our experiences of community notwithstanding, we become less when we walk away from it. Let me pause there. We'll continue in a moment.